London, 1852. The fog hung thick like a woolen curtain, soaking everything in dampness and soot. The clatter of horseshoes and the creak of wagon wheels echoed through cobbled. Alleyways darkened not just by the sky, but by grime. It wasn't just the buildings or the streets that stank. Of rot, it was the people themselves. The stench was inescapable. A cocktail of sweat, coal smoke, human waste, rotting meat and desperation. This was the height of the Victorian era, a time romanticized for its elegance. Poetry, courtship, and etiquette. But beneath the lace gloves and top hats, behind the velvet drapes and crinolines, was a truth so filthy, so wretched, that few dare speak it even today. Victorian hygiene wasn't just bad, it was a crisis. A social, medical, and moral catastrophe wrapped in corsets and smothered in rosewater. A society without soap. For the majority of working-class Victorians, soap was a luxury, not a staple. Many households might use the same bowl of water for washing faces in the morning, scrubbing laundry in the afternoon, and rinsing vegetables in the evening. It was not unusual for a family of 6 to share the same wash tub on bath day, and bath day was often once a week at most. For some, it was once a month. The concept of germs had not yet entered public knowledge. Doctors and midwives washed their hands only if they happened to feel like it. Certainly not between patients. Surgical instruments were often wiped on aprons and reused immediately. Many hospitals became death traps, places where wounds festered and infection ran wild. In poorer neighborhoods, people shared outdoor communal toilets called privies, which were little more than wooden benches over a pit. These were often located behind tenements and emptied, only when the smell became unbearable. Sometimes sewage flowed openly through the streets. During particularly hot summers, like the infamous Great Stink of 1858, the Thames itself reeked so badly that Parliament was nearly shut down due to the overpowering stench. Ladies' troubles, corsets, sweat, and secrecy. For women, hygiene was even more complicated and far more dangerous. Victorian fashion demanded layer upon layer, chemises, corsets, bustles, petticoats, and gowns. These clothes were not designed to be washed often, and certainly not with the harsh lye soap available at the time. Instead, they were spritzed with perfume or left to air out near windows. The result? Mildew, sweat, and body odor embedded deep into fabric worn close to the skin, day after day. Corsets, while praised for their figure-shaping magic, were a health nightmare, tightly laced to achieve the wasp waist ideal. Corsets compressed internal organs, restricted breathing, and caused fainting spells, indigestion, and muscle atrophy. Women often suffered from skin infections beneath the corset line, made worse by the lack of proper bathing. And when it came to menstruation, things were unspeakable. Disposable pads didn't exist. Tampons didn't exist. Even underwear was different. Open-crotch drawers were common. Women used rags, cotton, or even moss to absorb their flow, washing and reusing them repeatedly. If a woman bled through her skirts in public, she simply pretended nothing happened. There was no conversation about periods, no education, no advice, just silence. Men's smells and the rise of the stiff upper lip. Men were not spared from the filth. Most did not bathe regularly, perhaps once a week. If they had a tub and access to warm water, beards and mustaches were seen as marks of masculinity. But they also collected dust, ash, and the odor of pipe smoke and beer. Shaving wasn't necessarily hygienic. Either, razors were dull and shared in barbershops with minimal cleaning. Cuts became infected easily, leading to facial scarring and even sepsis. Public bathhouses existed, but they were rare and often segregated by class. In many rural areas, people bathed in streams or simply didn't wash at all. The idea of deodorant wouldn't enter the scene until late in the century, and even then, it was largely dismissed as effeminate. The doctor will see you now, if you survive. Medical hygiene during the Victorian era was horrifying by modern standards. In hospitals, the very idea that bacteria could live on hands or tools was unknown. Surgeons operated in their everyday clothes, often without gloves, and wiped their hands on their coats mid-surgery. Patients who survived amputations often died of gangrene or hospital fever. One notable case occurred at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, where a surgeon proudly boasted that he could remove a leg in under 3 minutes. He did, but the patient died of sepsis. The assistant lost 2 fingers, and an observer died of shock. The surgery had a 300% mortality rate. Midwives and doctors frequently moved between childbirths, without washing their hands, spreading deadly infections like puerperal fever from mother to mother. Entire wards of women died not from childbirth itself, but from the hands that delivered their babies. Household cleanliness and the reality of dirt. Victorians loved the idea of cleanliness, but their execution was sorely lacking. Floors were scrubbed and polished, but with dirty water. Furniture was dusted with rags that had cleaned multiple surfaces. Parasites thrived. Fleas, lice, bedbugs, and rats were part of daily life. Many households relied on chamber pots, porcelain bowls, kept under the bed and emptied in the morning. Some people simply flung their waste out of windows with a cry of "Gardy-loo!" as a warning to passers-by below. Children played barefoot in alleys slick with animal dung and wastewater. Disease was rampant: cholera, dysentery, tuberculosis, and understood poorly. Public health was considered a matter of morality, not science. The great cover-up, perfume, powder, and pretending. Instead of addressing the roots of their hygiene issues, Victorians covered them up. Women powdered their faces with lead-based makeup to hide blemishes caused by poor skin health. Men used pomades heavy with animal fat to slick their hair, often without ever washing it. Body odors were masked with perfumes made from whale ambergris, crushed flowers or spices, applied liberally to both skin and clothing. Rather than wash, they perfumed. Rather than treat, they endured. Those who suffered visibly, those with skin lesions, missing teeth, or coughing fits, were labeled as unclean and often shunned. The poor were blamed for spreading disease, though, in truth, it was ignorance that spread faster than anything. A society drowning in its own waste. It wasn't until the end of the 19th century that reformers, scientists, and public outcry began to push change. Sewer systems were improved. Clean water was made more widely available. Germ theory began to catch on. And hygiene, true hygiene, became a public health concern. But for decades, generations of people lived and died in a world where filth was normal, where odors were part of the atmosphere, and where clean meant something entirely different than it does today. The Victorian age was beautiful on the outside and rancid at the core.